To Joshua's Magic for another live stream discussing Alice A. Bailey quotes, this time on the topic of Sanat Kumara. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, consider hitting the subscribe button. You can find these quotes on my Minds and Instagram. Also, if you have any questions, post them in the comments or live chat. I'll try to get to them. But we will move on to the first quote on this mysterious entity, Sanat Kumara, or the Ancient of Days. According, therefore, to the condition of the sensitive bodies of the planet, of nations and of individuals, so will be their reaction to the five kinds of inflowing force. The Shambhala force, for instance, is making its impact upon the first ray types and upon other ray types on that line of major energy. The third, fifth, and seventh types evokes widely differing results than when it makes impact upon the second ray line of energy. The results of the impact of Shambhala energy upon first-rate individuals and nations can be potent in the extreme. So for those who don't know, the seven rays are these seven different energies that color all of creation and reality. And there's the ray 1, 3, 5, and 7 line, and then there's the ray 2, 4, and 6 line. And one way you could look at it is sort of the male line and the feminine line, but there's much more to it than that. And the first ray is very strongly associated with Shambhala, which is a place where this being, the Ancient of Days, Sanat Kumara, dwells. This impact, being relatively a new one to humanity, evokes in the world today all the political and organizational changes which are so prevalent and so disturbing. So these Shambhala impacts are first-rate impacts causing a lot of effects. Now, this was written last century, so you see all the upheaval that happened then. So that's kind of what this is referencing here. There is little that humanity can do about this except endeavor to balance this first-rate display of energy with second-rate or hierarchical force. This latter energy, working through the world religions and men and women who respond to the love influence, can change methods, though not purpose or direction, by pouring in of love. So you've got Shambhala, the first-rate center of the planet, and then you've got the spiritual hierarchy, which is the second-ray center. The first ray of will or power, the second ray of love, wisdom. And very highly evolved entities exist in Shambhala, but the spiritual hierarchy is less highly evolved entities. So you have the Christ and Buddha and various masters in the hierarchy, but then above them is sort of the, this father figure, if you will. If you think of the Christ life, Father, why have you forsaken me? And there's multiple meanings to that, but one of them is a reference to Sanat Kumara, the Ancient of Days. So I hope that's making a little sense, because the way reality plays out, and especially what's emphasized in the teachings here, is that things reflect in different ways. So there's a correspondence within you of the first ray center, the second ray center, and on like that. And so you see it play out in the world as well, as above, so below. Again, that force which we regard as emanating from strictly the human center, the third ray type of energy, the ray of active intelligence, is of the third or creative order. And in these three energies, you have in reality the expression of the three major centers of the planetary logos. The first of will energy is, as you know, focused in Sanat Kumara, the Ancient of Days, as he is called in this Christian Bible, the Lord of Shambhala, who is the embodiment of the personality of the planetary logos. The love force is focused through the two great spiritual lords of the hierarchy, the Buddha and the Christ, who are both embodiments of the heart center of the planetary logos. For the Buddha represents the 12-petaled lotus in the head, of which the Christ represents the counterpart, the 12-petaled lotus of the heart center. This is in fact seldom grasped or even mentioned. The petals of the throat center are represented at this time by certain leading world rulers, whose activity is responsible for the rapid creation of the New World and its rapidly altering civilizations and culture. These thoughts will provide much that you would do well to consider. Again, this is last century, so those world leaders are all dead now. But it's interesting to speculate who they might have been. But you have this triad of the first ray of will or power, the second ray of love, wisdom, and third ray of active intelligence. And these play out in all sorts of ways. You have the monad, the soul, and the personality. You have Shambhala, the hierarchy and humanity. You have the head center, the heart center, and the throat center. And there's different ways to look at things from another angle. Other centers might be considered in relating to certain rays, but that gives you some idea of this. And by the way, if you're liking the stream, please leave a like on it. It'd really help out the channel, and I'd appreciate it very much. But on to the next day's quote. I post some of these on Minds. Well, I post all of them on Minds, but some of them I read from Minds because Instagram only lets you post so long, and Minds I can put more in there. I would like to point out that the distinction between the quote sheep and the goats is mainly hierarchical. The term goats is esoterically applied to initiated disciples, to those whom have climbed the mountain of initiation. The term sheep is applied to those who are following blindly the inner urge of their souls and who are groping their way in relatively large numbers toward the hierarchy. For them still has to come the great revelation that the kingdom of God is within you. Such is the word for them at this stage of humanity's history. Once they have realized that, they are already being absorbed into the hierarchy. Life will now for them simplify. For the goats must come the impelling call from the highest aspect of the spiritual triad. Seek the way of ascension. Ascension out of even the trial of the life into that of pure being or monadic existence. So the spiritual triad exists kind of between the soul or the higher self and the monad. So it's kind of between the father and the son, and it's this intermediary that links it higher up, and eventually you ascend out of the spiritual triad even, which is the goal at one point in the path, and you become polarized in the monadic consciousness of pure being. In this great judgment, all decision lies in the conclusive thinking of Sanat Kumara. It is his judgment, neither the sheep nor the goats, nor the great mass of men from among whom they have emerged, can affect a decision in the slightest degree. Any moment or climax of decision on the part of the Lord of the world institutes new law and brings into play new energies. Laws are only the unalterable condition brought about by the activity, the orientation, and the emanated decisive thoughts of the one in whom we live and move and have our being. Just as the activities, the orientation, and thinking of a human being carry the cells and the atoms of his body along the lines of his wishes. Energies are but the rhythm of his breathing and the results of the systolic and the diastolic action of his heart. And I believe that means sort of the pumping in and the pumping out of the heart. From these energies, we cannot escape, but in a mysterious and a peculiar manner, the planetary logos directs them or withholds them to suit the recognized planetary needs of the period. At this time, the eye of his direction is tuned towards a needy and waiting world, and particularly towards the large number of waiting people who hold within themselves the potencies of discipleship. They are the hope of the world. This outpouring of directed energy means a great stimulation of all sensitive and responsive aspirants. The result is not an easy one for them. Everything in them is raised to the surface of consciousness, and whilst they are faced with a vital and beneficent opportunity, they are also faced with the problem of absorbing more quote-unquote punishment. Is not that the word I want, my brother? Than they would normally take. Will they break under the impact of self-discovery and opportunity to eliminate personality, or will they rise triumphant from the ashes of their dead selves into a living power and beauty? So these spiritual energies, you have to sort of die to the lower self to become born again into the higher self or the higher consciousness. And again, this was last century, so these impacts were really pouring in strongly. And we see the results today for good and bad. whether the disciples succeeded in some instances or failed in a number of other ones. That's the world we're living with today, and that's the problems we have to work out. The next quote, the method of direct incarnation was earlier seen when the Kumaras were in physical form. This only applied to some of them. Sanat Kumara and his pupils are in physical form, but have not taken dense physical bodies. They work in the vital etheric levels and dwell in etheric bodies. Shambhala, where they dwell, exists in physical matter, as do the Kumaras, but it is a matter of higher ethers on the physical plane, and only when man has developed etheric vision will the mystery lying beyond the Himalayas be revealed. Therefore, Sanat Kumara is the planetary logos, yet he is not. A reflection of this method of direct incarnation can be seen when a disciple steps out of his body and permits his guru or a more advanced chela to use it. So, for those who don't know, the physical and etheric planes are considered to be part of the physical level. So the three lower planes of the physical level, which is sometimes thought of as the states of liquid, for example, solid. No, not states of liquid. What is it? Yeah, solid, liquid, and gas. Those are sort of considered to be the physical levels. But then the etheric levels of the physical plane are, the fourth ether, the third ether, the second ether, and the first ether. So Sanat Kumara has a body along with some of his associates and the city or location of Shambhala in this higher etheric matter, which most people aren't able to see. And it's apparently in the Gobi Desert. It doesn't say it here, but it says it elsewhere. So that's kind of some details on him. But he's kind of the vessel for the planetary logos, but isn't it at the same time, in a sense? There's not a complete alignment. But he is kind of the vehicle for the planetary logos. And I think in the previous quote, he said it was like sort of like his personality, whereas the soul or the monad of the planetary logos is even higher and more exalted. So move on to the next day's quote. A little bit about the purpose of the creation of our planet. The Lord of the world, through meditation, is carrying forward processes which he instituted in his original creative meditation, back in the darkest night of time, when he decided to create this planet of ours for strictly redemptive purposes. The whole creation is the result of his directed and controlled thought, a process of sustained thinking which sweeps all of the created energies into evolutionary and cyclical activity, in conformity to the pattern which he eternally visualizes. He has organized a group which is responsive to his meditative intention. These beings aid him in their concentrated and realized purpose to bring into our planetary livingness certain extraplanetary energies which are needed to carry forward the planned work of the planetary logos. Shambhala itself is also permeated with his thought and conscious, if I may speak symbolically, of that which the logos has visualized. They are custodians of his purpose as it is revealed to them cycle by cycle. The length of these cycles is one of the mysteries which is strictly guarded in the council chamber of the Lord of the world. These cycles have reference only to the manifestation in the three worlds wherein the concepts of time and space control. The hierarchy is the custodian of that aspect of the cyclical planetary purpose which we call the plan. It covers such relatively brief periods as civilizations, where humanity is concerned. In relation to Shambhala, the intermediate group of meditating creative workers is called into activity in order to receive impressions of the immediate desired hierarchical activity, to transmit the needed energies from Shambhala to the united ashrams, and thus esoterically inform the hierarchy of that which merits immediate attention. So you see this great chain of being in existence here, of the energies of Shambhala emanating out, and the hierarchy working with those energies, and the hierarchy working with smaller cycles, but Shambhala working with larger cycles. And the final quote, I like these some of these AI images. A few years ago, you couldn't find stuff like this on the free image sites, but now with the AI stuff, there's more options for some of these things, so that's nice. Though the Christ is the head of the hierarchy, it is Sanat Kumara, the Ancient of Days, whose ashram it truly is. The Christ, I am using one of his official names, is indeed the master of all masters and the coordinator of the entire life of the great ashram. In conjunction with the two other hierarchical officials, the Manu and the Mahakohan, the information I gave as to the constitution of the hierarchy in Initiation Human and Solar was along the same line. The hierarchy is the ashram of Sanat Kumara, but he has delegated his authority right down the ages to the so-called world saviors successively. Their life expression embodied in every case the goal of the period during which they held office. And so the Christ is the most current person to hold this office of the Christ or the world savior. Before it, for a lesser period of time, was the Buddha, and before him, others. It even says in a different part of the writings that there was somebody named Vyasa, who is the head of the hierarchy, and DK talks about him a little. And even the figure we know mythologically as Hercules was once the head of the hierarchy. Though his antics and exploits aren't to be taken literally, they're sort of symbolic in myths. But the keynote he presented was that there's something a great thing for a man to be accomplishing, that you can step towards divinity from being just the son of God to a god. And so that was, I think, related somewhat to the keynote that Hercules presented. And you see, the keynote that the Buddha presented in Buddhism, and then in Christianity, the principle Christ laid out for us. In the early days of the hierarchy, millennia of years ago, neither the official directors of the hierarchy nor the masters were of the caliber which they are today. Had they been so, they would have been too far removed from the factual life of the cycle, and therefore useless in the cycle of divine life which existed. The growth of humanity and its evolutionary status, when compared with primordial and primitive man, can be seen in the quality of the hierarchy today, which humanity produced and towards which it looks for guidance and teaching. This is an interesting point which I offer for your consideration. Never forget, my brothers, that as it is humanity which has furnished the personnel of the hierarchy, including the Christ, the first of our humanity to achieve divinity. We have therefore the guarantee, the assurance of humanity's ultimate success. The three major executives of the hierarchy are: one, the Christ, representing the second ray of love wisdom; two, the Manu, representing the first ray of will or power; three, the Mahakohan, representing the third ray of active intelligence, are responsible to the Lord of the world for the processing of the life and impulse which conditions the evolutionary process. This statement is made without any further definition by me, because the whole subject is too abstruse, and it would require another treatise like that of cosmic fire to make it even a little clearer. So the hierarchy is this ashram, this working group, this somewhat inner circle of Sanat Kumara. And all the masters that are a part of that are part of his ashram in a sense. And he's stood for ages past, since some point in the creation of the world, watching over things. Whereas the members of the hierarchy, initially they came from not from our humanity, but from other planets or other solar systems. And eventually, when they reached a certain point, they moved on. But as humanity evolved, the members of the hierarchy began filling with masters that had evolved here on Earth, like the Christ. And Buddha was initially from another planet, but he took some time on Earth to evolve also. So you get sort of a picture of how the hierarchy works, and the changeableness of the hierarchy, whereas the kind of remaining the same of Shambhala. So I hope everybody found those interesting and informative. If you did, please leave a like, consider sharing with somebody who would be of interest, And if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe and notification bell. But until next time, namaste.